Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing another true crime video. I'm wearing the same shirt that I was last time. I promise it's a new day. I just apparently really like this shirt and I just realized it and I'm not going to change. Anyways, my name is Alexis. I am 20 years old. I do all sorts of things on my channel here. Today we are going to be doing true crime though. This is where I sit down and I do my makeup to keep me busy because it helps me tell the story a little bit better. It just helps me tell the story a little bit better because, you know, ADHD, I got to keep myself busy while I'm doing this. Otherwise you're going to hear and cuts a lot and we don't want that. So you can do your makeup along with me or you can just sit and listen. But today we are going to be talking about Jeffrey Dahmer and I'm going to tell you exactly who Jeffrey Dahmer is and what he did. Also, I'd like to apologize for these eyebrows. I forgot to buy an eyebrow pencil when I went makeup shopping the other day and I can't find my good eyebrow brush or the eyeshadow that I like to use. So we're just going to work with these and we're going to call them good. So we all know who Jeffrey Dahmer is. He's one of the most famous serial killers, but a lot of us, like myself, we don't really know everything that he did or what exactly did he do. Like, what is he famous for? Like, a lot of us don't know that. We just know that he's a famous serial killer and he did some pretty shitty shit. Okay, so before we jump into everything, I would like to put a disclaimer. We are talking about rape, murder, everything disgusting that you could imagine. So if you're a little sensitive to that, I would click off this video. Otherwise, just hold on to your britches. It gets a little gory in here. I also today will not be saying any of the victims' names. A lot of their families don't like it when their names are out there. I don't blame them. They want nothing to do or associate with this. They have sued some people, so I'm just not going to say any victims' names today. I will be still telling their stories, but there you have it. So let's start in the beginning to get this man's childhood background, how he grew up, how he was raised, things like that. So Jeffrey was born May 26, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now, if you asked outside family members or Jeffrey himself, he would say that he was very deprived and not loved on a bunch as a child. His parents would say otherwise. They said that they gave him all the love that they could and all of that bull crap. It was a bunch of crap. Jeffrey said it himself that he was deprived as a child. Growing up, this was the time when the men provided for the family. So Jeffrey spent a lot more time with his mother, and his mother's name is Joyce. Jeffrey said that she was very tense growing up. She was very greedy, and she always wanted all of the attention to be on her. So because of how his mother acted, his parents, they argued a lot, and Jeffrey would just be sitting there listening to these fights. When Jeffrey went into first grade, his father also began studying at a university to become a chemist. So his dad going to a university really caused his father to not ever be home. So this caused his mother to fall into a depression where she wouldn't get out of bed. She was super weak. She wasn't eating. She just was depressed. You know how we all get. So because she was so depressed, when Jeff's father was home, she demanded that all of the attention be on her. There could be none for Jeff. She was worse than before with the attention thing. So Jeff hardly ever got to spend time with his father. He really just spent a lot of time alone. And Joyce at one point, she got so depressed that she did attempt suicide. She was not successful with it. I don't know if that's how you want to say it. That's just the word that comes into my head. That sounds awful, successful with it. But she didn't go through with the suicide. She's fine afterwards and she lived. And Jeff will say over and over again that all he remembers is that his childhood was extremely intense and that all his mother and father did was argue. Now, Jeff was said to be this super energetic, full of life kid. And then when he turned 4, he had to have a surgery to remove a double hernia. And everyone said this is when Jeff took a 180 and just completely flipped and became a totally different kid. When Jeff was in school, he was described as this super quiet and timid child. On one of his report cards, his teacher did write down in her notes that she did feel like he was neglected at home, but nothing happened with that. She just basically wrote it down as a note that she noticed. But nothing ever came of it. When Jeff was younger, he quickly got into dead animals and insects and things. It started with insects and fish. He would kind of pull them apart and stuff. Fish, he would open them up, look inside. And then it quickly became roadkill that he was super interested in. So Jeff would go and collect this roadkill off the side of the road, and he thought nothing was bad of it because it was already dead. It was just gonna sit there and rot anyway. So in the family's like backyard, they had this like little shed, like a tool shed thing. He would take the dead animals back there and he would like dismember them, kind of like take them apart, see how they were like put together, as he said. And then if there were ever like any cool body parts that he like didn't know about yet, he would just take them and like put them into mason jars. So then he would like take these dead animals, and if he was like looking at the body parts more, he was keeping them, he would keep them in the shed. Otherwise he would take them, they had like a wooded area in their backyard, and he would just like toss them and get rid of them. Okay, I am gonna warn you guys right here that this is like the first gruesome story. So if you're not good with it, this one's talking about a dead dog. If you're not, if you're even a little bit antsy, I would like skip through this, and you can wait till we talk about the humans. If the humans don't bother you as much as dogs, like I know that's how some of y'all are, but this story is pretty gross. So Jeff found this dog that was hit like and left on the side of the road. God, this story's so gross. This story's so gross. And he decided to go get this dog and like bring it back to the shed, and he doesn't do what he normally does with other animals where he like just dismembers them and takes them apart. He cuts the head off of this dog and like removes the body from it, then nails the body to a tree, and then he takes the head and he like takes all the flesh and the fur off of the skull, and then he just puts it on a wooden cross. And I'm laughing because this is just so uncomfy and uneasy. How do you just like in your brain be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna cut its head off, and I'm gonna put the body on a tree, and then I'm gonna take all the flesh and the fur off of the skull, and I'm gonna put the skull on a wooden cross and hang it like Jesus. That was like the first time that Jeff ever did anything like super. It's all weird. It's all weird. I get like you're curious as a kid to like dissect animals, whatever. I hunt animals, like, but I'm not gonna sit there and like pick each thing out. But this is the first like super weird, gruesome, grody, fricked up crap that this man has done. So then in 1966, the family moves to Doylestown, Ohio. And so at this time, his mother was pregnant with the second baby that Jeffrey got to name, and Jeffrey chose the name David for his little brother. And then in 1968, just 2 years later, they moved over to Bath, Ohio. Now, I couldn't ever figure out exactly why they moved to Ohio. I assume it was for his dad's job and like job opportunities. Then nothing really happens between these years. Like Jeff is just this quiet kid in school. He never really made any friends or anything. He just was hanging out, doing his thing. And then in 1970, they're sitting down having a family dinner, and they're eating chicken. And suddenly Jeff like just gets this idea like, hey, let me ask my dad this question. And he asked his dad, how do I like preserve bones? And this got his dad excited because his dad was beginning to worry about Jeffrey because he didn't have any friends or like interest in anything. So he thought maybe like, oh my God, he's having an interest in like chemistry, like he's gonna like take over like my career, things like that. So he's like, yes, let's have a bonding moment. I'm gonna teach you how to preserve bones. So then Jeff learns how to do this on like a bleach like chemical solution to help like preserve the bones and like get all the meat and stuff off. And he just kind of does that for a while. So that kind of wraps up like Jeff's childhood pretty much. That was about all the exciting grossness that ever happened. So then we kind of jump into Jeff going to high school. Now, Jeff at the beginning of age of 14 got really bad into drinking alcohol. It was pretty bad. So he would actually he would drink before school, during school, and after school, and he would smuggle it into school, like in the lining of his coat, and then he would put it in his locker, and then like between classes, he would just go take a drink and then return to class. And then Jeff hit puberty, and he realized that he was more interested in men than he was women, and he really wasn't interested in women. And he wouldn't bring this up to any family members. This was a time when like being gay was considered like really bad, and not something that you should be at all. And he hid this from his family, but he also did like pursue a relationship with a guy, and then it just kind of crumbled. And it really crumbled because Jeff began to fantasize like having like a super submissive partner, and he would be super dominant, and he could just tell that this wasn't what that guy wanted, so they really didn't do a whole lot with each other after that. And then in 1977, Jeff's grades just began to like massively drop, and of course he blamed this on his binge drinking, which of course is probably the main reason of it. But also this time his parents' marriage was beginning to blow up, and his parents began marriage counseling, and marriage counseling didn't work, so then they decided to get a divorce. So really just this whole time Jeff is just really going through it. In May 1978, Jeff graduates high school. He's able to graduate. His grades, I don't really know if grades mattered back then if you graduated or not, but he graduated. And so when his parents split, his dad actually got custody of David and she got custody of Jeff. Well, Jeff could really decide where he wanted to go, but Joyce at this time, she was getting custody back of David, and as soon as she did, she moved out and just left Jeff at the family home, and she went and moved in with other family members. And then, so June rolls around, and it's June 18th, and Jeff notices this hitchhiker on the side of the road, and Jeff just immediately starts fantasizing, like dominating this hitchhiker, like fantasizing like him being super submissive, like picking up this hitchhiker and like taking over. So Jeff pulls over and he asks the guy, hey, like, do you want to come hang out? Like, we can go back to my place. We can drink beers, just hang out. And the man agrees and he gets in with Jeff and they go back to Jeff's place. They start listening to music and they're drinking beer and they're having like a great time. And so Jeff thinks that they're like super hitting it off and like Jeff's like ready to like possibly like make a move on him. Then the hitchhiker says, all right, I think I'm like ready to go home. Like he's just like over it. He's like, we're done hanging out. Like I'm done. Like he wasn't that interested as Jeff thought he was. And this like super upset Jeff. So then the guy's just sitting there in a chair and Jeff decides he sees his 10-pound dumbbell sitting on the floor. And so he grabs it and he just starts whacking the guy over the head with it, like just beating him with this 10-pound dumbbell. And like once this kid is like knocked out, Jeff then like strangles him to death. He just strangles him, like something just told him just to strangle him to death. Once Jeff knows that this kid is like for sure dead, he takes off all of his clothes, lays him on the floor, and Jeff stands over the top of him and masturbates. Apparently this was pretty sexy to him. He literally just masturbated over the top of this poor kid. So this was Jeff's first time killing someone, and he said like he still remembered it till the day that he died. Like it was so exciting for him and like exhilarating and made him feel all sorts of ways, and it just really excited him. He waits till the next day to do something with his body, and he decides to dismember it the same way he would with his animals. So he dismembers the body into like pieces, like as many as he can, and then he takes it to the backyard and he just digs at a grave and buries it. And then several weeks go by and Jeff decides to dig up the body and make it into more pieces to bury it. When he dug up this body, he then like used his dad's like preserving techniques to get the flesh off of the bones to like make it like disappear. He puts the body in acid to get rid of like everything else that's like stuck on there, and then he just dumps this acid down the toilet like it's nothing. And he like takes the bones and he like wraps them up in like plastic and paper, and he starts smashing them with a mallet and just to like break them down and like pretty much makes them into dust, and then he throws them into the woods. So like another 6 weeks go by and Jeff's father has a new fiance. He is in love. He just loves this new woman of his, and they decided they're going to go see Jeff and see how he's doing, because Jeff hasn't really talked to his father or anything since like his father moved out. And this is when Jeff's dad discovers that he's living alone, and his dad does not like this. He's like, where the hell is your mother? Where'd she go? Jeff's like, I've just been living here by myself. It's no big deal. So Jeff's dad just really did not like that he was living alone. He knew that Jeff wasn't like being productive in anything. He wasn't doing anything with his life. Jeff's dad is like, you should go to college. Like, I'll pay for your college. Like, I have the money to do so. And he sits there and he's just like convincing Jeff, and Jeff agrees to go to college. So he goes to Ohio State University. And Jeff's GPA was literally a 0.45. That was all the higher his GPA got. Yep. Good job, Jeff. And so 3 months into college, Jeff just drops out. He's like, this isn't for me. And Jeff's dad paid in advance and he wasn't going to get that money back. But his dad was like, I get it, like, you're not doing well. I'm not gonna force you to sit here and be in college, blah, blah, blah. So then his dad's like, but you need to do something with your life. You know, like the fatherly figure thing, like you've got to do something. Like he knew Jeff needed to do something. His dad tells him, hey, why don't you enlist in the army? Like, you get to travel, you do all these cool things, whatever. So Jeff enlists in the army and becomes a medical specialist. And then in July 1979, he was deployed to West Germany, where he was a combat medic. And according to public records and things, and just research, it did say that he was a pretty average soldier. He was a little bit above average. He wasn't like spectacular. He got the job done, basically. So later on, two soldiers come forward and they claim that Jeff had raped them. And this was a pretty serious ordeal, obviously. One victim had said that he had been raped repeatedly over a 17-month period, which is basically their whole deployment. And then another victim said that Jeff had just drugged him and raped him. March 1981 comes around, and March is deemed unsuitable to be active duty or in the military at all anymore. So he was discharged, and now he was discharged for his drinking. That was pretty much it. He never gave up the drinking. So he went to South Carolina for his debriefing and all that, and they gave him a plane ticket to go anywhere in the United States. He could pick wherever. Jeff knew he couldn't really go home to his father because his father was going to be super disappointed. So Jeff's like, all right, I'm going to go to Miami, Florida. So Jeff goes to Miami, Florida because he doesn't want to face his father and be told that he's a failure yet again. So Jeff gets to Miami, Florida, and he actually does find a job at a local restaurant, and he's just like renting a room in a motel to live in. He spent the majority of his money on alcohol, and then eventually he got evicted because he wasn't paying for the motel room. After he gets kicked out and he's left stranded, he's like, all right, I've got to call my dad. He's the only person that's going to help me through this. So he calls his dad. He's like, hey, listen, I got kicked out of the army. I've been living in Miami. But I just got kicked out of a motel. Can I come back to Ohio? He was in with his dad and his stepmother, and he's just trying to figure out life. His dad's trying to help him out with everything. Force him to be going out during the day and trying to find a job. And then when he gets home, like, he has like a whole list of chores that he has to get done. And Jeff's drinking still was not under control. And then he eventually got arrested for drunken disorderly conduct. And he was fined $60 and had to spend 10 days in jail. Jeff's dad was like, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. Like, there's empty alcohol bottles all over my son's room. He just got arrested. Like, nothing that I'm doing is helping him. So he's like, Jeff, you're gonna go live with your grandma. And so Jeff's grandma was really the only family member that like truly loved Jeff. Like, she loved Jeff. She showed him love, and Jeff knew this. So when he moved in with his grandma, things actually changed. Like, he started going to church and like trying to better himself, and he actually was a lot happier living with his grandmother. So then he finds a job at the Milwaukee Blood Plasma Center, and then after 10 months he was laid off, and then he was unemployed for 2 years, I believe. Yeah, 2 years. And then in 1985, he began visiting these local gay bathhouses, which, if you don't know what that is, just Google it. So he would go into these bathhouses, and he would have sex with the men and that were working there. And he said that he like got frustrated pretty quickly because they wanted to talk and they moved around too much, and he just wanted someone that was going to shut the hell up and lay there. So this is when Jeff began lacing their drinks. 12 different occasions, and then the owners found out, and they're like, dude, you gotta go, like, you're out. And then he was banned from all of the local bathhouses. And Jeff wasn't upset when he got kicked out. He kind of like was like, I can do this on my own. I don't need them. So he then begins renting out motel rooms, and he begins like inviting men over, and then he drugs them and he rapes them. So then on November 20th, 1987, Jeff meets this man at the bar, and he's like, hey, you want to come back to my motel room? He does this thing, he drugs them, and then he rapes them. So then Jeff wakes up the next morning, and underneath of him is this man, and this man's chest is just like caved in and crushed. And he's got bruises all over his chest and body, and he's got blood coming out of his mouth, and Jeff's like hand and forearm were as well bruised. Jeff says he has no memory whatsoever of killing this man, and he has no idea what happened that night, and he literally just wanted to drug and rape him. He didn't want to kill him. So Jeff's like, I gotta get this body out of this motel room, right? So he goes and he buys a big suitcase and just shoves the body in it, takes it back to his grandma's house, and lets the suitcase sit there with the dead body in it for 2 weeks before he does something. Sorry, not 2 weeks, just a week. Sorry. There's a lot of stories for this man, okay? So he opens up a leak later and he starts just dismembering this body, but this time he does things a little different. So Jeff saves the head, the arms, the legs, and the torso of this man, and he cuts like all the flesh off the bones. He does like all of that for like the rest of it, cuts them in tiny pieces, puts it into trash bags, and then he just took this dude out with the trash. He's like, here you go, you're trash, so I'm gonna throw you in the trash. Poor dude. That's not a way to go out at all. He does this thing where he takes a sledgehammer and he like wraps up the bones and beats them until they're pretty much dust, and so he then just throws them in the trash as well. So you remember that he like kept the head and a couple things. Well, he decided that he wanted to preserve the head and like keep it, like he wanted this man's skull. So he tries to do what his dad taught him in preserving. So he boils the skull, but he put too much bleach in it, and then this caused the skull to like become really brittle, and it just like broke into 100 pieces. This really upset Jeff because he really wanted this guy's skull. So at this point, Jeff is just determined to get a skull. He's like already thinking about his next victim and how he's going to attempt to preserve the skull again, and he's just coming up with a plan. 2 months go by and Jeff actually meets this 14-year-old sex worker. That is terrible. I am assuming that this is like a human trafficking thing, because human trafficking has been a long time. Just saying 14 years old just makes me want to throw up in my mouth and croak. Jeff offers him $50 to come back, and he'd be like, hey, can you pose nude for some photos for me? And this kid's like, yeah, $50 just to pose nude? Like, let me go for it. And Jeff tells the kid, like, I don't want sex. I just want some nude photos of you. So they go back to Jeff's grandmother's house, and they end up having sex. Disgusting. Disgusting. So then Jeff drugs this child after they have sex, and then he strangles the child to death, his routine that he does. And then Jeff left the body in the basement for a week before doing anything with it. I don't know why he would leave. Like, it had to smell so bad, like, on day 3. Like, how do you just leave a dead body sitting there for a week at a time? So then Jeff does his, like, dismembering and acid thing, and he tries to preserve the skull and fails as well. On March 24th, 1994, Jeff meets a 22-year-old, offers him $50 to come back, hang out, drink some beers with him. And this dude's like, $50? Hell yeah. He goes back with Jeff. Jeff is a liar. He does his routine. He drugs him, he rapes him, and he strangles him to death. However, when this victim died, Jeff decided to perform oral sex on this poor victim. I'm sorry, I just get the chills. And this body he actually ended up taking care of within 24 hours. He just dismembered it and just took care of it. And he said he didn't want the skull of this one. He wasn't attracted to the man like he was the other ones. So he didn't even really mess with the skull. April 23rd, Jeff gets another victim. He does his whole ordeal. He drugs them, he rapes them, he strangles them. April 23rd comes by. Jeff has another victim. However, this time his grandmother yells down the basement stairs, like being like, hey Jeff, is that you? And Jeff tries to play off like he's alone down there and no one else is with him, but his grandma knew that someone was down there. So Jeff's like, shit, what am I gonna do with this dude? Like, I can't just get rid of him. I can't kill him. So Jeff, he had already drugged this man, so he decides to just carry him to the car. He throws him in the car, and then he takes him to the local county hospital, just drops him off and leaves. This was the only victim of Jeff's that ever got lucky, so to say. September 1988, Jeff's grandma decides that she hasn't had enough with him too. And she's like, Jeff, I need you to move out. There's awful smells all around my house, like the basement, the garage. And I know it's coming from your stuff. Like, I'm just done. She also did not like that all these strange men were coming into her house. Like, it just freaked her out. Like, she knew that he was bringing these men in, but she had no idea that he was killing them. So Jeff's like, all right, like, I'm not gonna make my grandma mad. So he goes and he finds a job at the local chocolate factory. He saves up money, and then he gets himself a 1-bedroom apartment. Not even 24 hours into Jeff moving into this new apartment, he gets arrested. So he was kind of set up on this, but he brought back this 13-year-old boy to his apartment, and he got caught like drugging the boy and sexually, they labeled it sexually fondling him. I assume that's just touching him. I don't know that they actually did anything. It just said sexually fondling. So Jeff has to move back in with his grandmother again, because clearly he can't live on his own, and his grandma's like, really, Jeff? Really? I wanted the house to myself. January 1989 rolls around, and he was convicted of 2nd-degree assault and enticing a child of immoral purposes. So he got pretty in trouble for it. And then March 25th, 1989, Jeff meets this 24-year-old model at the bar. And Jeff said that he didn't want to get into any trouble this night, but it was towards closing time, and the model walked up to him and he's talking to him, and it just seems so magical to him. So he's like, hey, you want to go back to my place? They go back to Jeff's place. They had oral sex, and then Jeff does his routine. He drugs him and he rapes him, and then he strangles him. This time Jeff puts the body into his grandma's bathtub. I don't know where grandma was during this point. It didn't say, but he puts the body in grandma's bathtub, and then he cuts up the body like pretty much right away, and he does his whole like dismembering routine. And then Jeff said, and I quote while talking about this story, he said that he was exceptionally attractive, end quote. And so he decided to keep this man's skull and penis, and he preserved both of them. And he stored them both in his locker at work in like an acetone mixture. And then May 23rd, 1989 rolls around, and Jeff was sentenced to 5 years probation. And this goes back to that little kid that he got caught with. This freaking fly, back off. So he gets 5 years probation. He does get a work release permit, so he can still go to work. And then he had to register as a sex offender. May 1990 rolls around. Jeff moves into an apartment on North 25th Street. He feels like he's ready this time, and he was really kind of a little bit more eager to get out of his grandma's house at this point. So he moves to North 25th Street in Milwaukee, which is really a high crime area. It's not the safest neighborhood, but Jeff doesn't care, and it's close to his work. And this apartment was fully furnished and only $300 a month. Could you imagine a fully furnished apartment for $300 a month right now? I think I would cry. A week into living to this new place, he's ready to get his next victim and in his new place. And so altogether, this would be victim number 6. And Jeff found a 33-year-old sex worker, and he offered him $50 to have sex with him. And so they go back to Jeff's apartment, and this is where he does his thing. He drugs him, he rapes him, and then he strangles him. But earlier that day, Jeff went and bought a Polaroid camera, and he decided that he was going to use this Polaroid camera to take pictures of his victim. So after he kills this man, he puts him into like positions, positions. And so he takes pictures of him in these positions. Sorry, it's just a really gross story, and I did not know all of this about this man until I did this research. And there's more stories than of people just encountering with him. He just my skin is itchy. So he takes all these photos, and then he begins dismembering the man. This time he boiled parts of the body in a steel kettle on his stove. That's what it's called, a freaking stove. And he rinsed off the bones to get rid of the skin after he boils them. And then the rest of the body he dissolved in acid and skull. the skull, he was actually very successful in keeping this one. He like did it perfectly that time, and he actually decided to spray paint this skull, and then he put it in a metallic filing cabinet and put it next to the other one. In 1990, Jeff convinces a 27-year-old man to his apartment, and he does his whole shabackle, his whole thing. He drugs him, he rapes him, he strangles him. However, this victim, he decides to put some of his body parts, like as many as he can, into the freezer to like prevent them from getting moisture into them. And then this skeleton he put into acid, and several months later, then he takes care of the skull, but he destroys it. He went to go like put it in the oven to like dry it, and then it just exploded. No more skull. Then later on, Jeff meets a 22-year-old from Chicago, offers him $50 to come over, offers him $50 to just come over and hang out. So they go back to Jeff's apartment, and Jeff tries to perform oral sex on this man, and this man stops him, and he says, and I quote, "That'll cost you extra," end quote. And Jeff just begins fuming after this. He's pissed. And he didn't have enough sleeping pills to fully knock this man out. He only had like 2, and he usually put like 5 or 7 in a drink. And so Jeff just walks up to this man and cuts his throat open. And then Jeff gets his camera and he puts him into positions. He takes the photos, and then he puts the body in the bathtub and dismembers him. Jeff said while the body was in the bathtub, this is really gross. I feel like I got bugs on me. He cuts the head off, and while he's taking apart this body, he decides to like kiss it, make out with it, and like talk to it like he's got a friend in there. Ooh. So he wrapped this victim's hearts, biceps, and some flesh from his legs into like a plastic bag, and then put them in the fridge, and then he put the organs into like a jelly-like substance to get rid of them, and then he used Soil X and a chemical cleaner to remove the flesh from the bones. And then he also like painted this victim's skull with enamel. He was successful with keeping this one too. September 24th, Jeff lures another victim in, but he's not like attracted to this one, so he just does his thing, takes pictures, dismembers him, and throws the whole body away. April 7th, 1991, Jeff talks a 19-year-old into coming over, and he drugs him. He does this whole thing. Instead of strangling him to death, Jeff gets this idea to drill holes into this kid's skull, and then he pours acid into like the hole that he drilled. And so the victim is still alive. He's not dead. And he wakes up, and Jeff like gets super excited. He's like, yes, I've got like this super submissive partner that can't do anything. And he just gets really excited. So this victim wakes up and he looks at Jeff, and he says to Jeff, and I quote, "I have a headache. What time is it?" End quote. And Jeff decides that he needs to be drugged again. So he drugged him again. And Jeff was apparently bored, because then he just decides to strangle and decapitate this poor kid. Like, he's just like, all right, I had my submissive partner for 2 seconds. Now I'm just going to kill him. Like, you finally got what you wanted, but then you kill him. This is horrible that I'm saying this, but like, he finally got what he wanted, and then he just kills him anyway. Like, Jeffrey, we could have ended this, buddy. So Jeff kills him. He's like, I really want to keep this skull, because it's the first one he's ever like drilled a hole into, and it's like super cool to him, not to anybody else. This is fucking weird, Jeff. So he is like trying super hard to keep this skull. He puts it into cold water and salt for a few weeks, hoping that the solution would work. I don't know why he didn't just use like his previous, like, I don't know why he didn't like write down how he successfully preserved skulls, because he just like messed the next ones up. Obviously this dude doesn't have a very good brain, but this solution just didn't work, putting it in the cold water and salt, and then he just ended up throwing it away because it just wasn't working. And then at this time, people in the apartment complex, they start complaining because of this awful smell coming from Jeff's apartment. Like, I couldn't even imagine what it smelled like in there. And they also complained that they could hear a chainsaw every once in a while, and they're like, why the hell is there a chainsaw in this apartment? Like, this makes no sense. So the manager calls Jeff. He doesn't go to his apartment or anything. He just calls Jeff. He's like, hey, I got people complaining that your apartment stinks. Get it cleaned up. And Jeff's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. My freezer went out and all my food's spoiled. And the apartment manager's just like, all right, get it cleaned up. Not a problem. So then 2 weeks go by, people are still complaining that it still smells. And the apartment manager calls up again. This time Jeff's like, oh, all my tropical fish, they died. They all died, and that's why it smells so bad. So the apartment manager's like, all right, get it cleaned up. Get the smell gone. I'm tired of people complaining. May 26, 1991. Jeff offers a 14-year-old to hang out. Now this child's pretty resistant at first, and then he kind of caves in and he goes to Jeff's apartment anyways. And this boy ended up posing nude for photos for Jeff, and then Jeff drugs him and drills holes into his skull. And then Jeff poured hydrochloric acid into like the hole that he poured, and of course the victim was still alive. The victim wakes up and he's like super like disoriented, obviously, and they're walking back to Jeff's room. Now there was a body of a previous person that Jeff had killed just laying naked on the floor. Like Jeff hadn't taken care of the body, and the victim sees this, and like the panic and adrenaline that went over the boy's body like made him pass out again, so he couldn't like try to save himself. So Jeff and this kid are like laying in Jeff's bed, and Jeff is just drinking beers next to this poor passed out kid. And then Jeff decides that he's gonna leave. He decides that it's fine that the boy's sitting there. So he goes to the bar, and then he has like a drink, and then he goes to the liquor store to get more alcohol, and then he comes back. Well, coming back, this kid is standing on the corner of the street butt naked, and these women are surrounding him, and they're like, oh my God, are you okay? Like asking him a million questions, like trying to get answers out of him, and this boy can't answer. He can't, like, it was amazing that he got down there. Like, I don't know how he got down there, but it was pretty shocking that he did. Jeff panics and he comes with this story, walks up to them. He's like, hey, this is my friend. He's super drunk. Let me just get him back to my apartment. And he's fine. Like, he's fine. And these women, they knew better, because women have instincts. We have instincts. We know when something is wrong. And one woman had already called 911, and so they were just trying to prevent Jeff from going back to his apartment until police showed up. And when police arrived, Jeff was like, hey, this is my 19-year-old boyfriend. We just drank way too much, and police just thought he was telling the truth. And one of the women pulls the officers aside, and she's like, this isn't right. Like, he's bleeding from his behind. He can't speak. Like, something is wrong. The officer looks at this woman and says, and I quote, butt out, shut the hell up, and not to interfere, end quote. Cops give the kid a towel to cover up, and they help Jeff walk him back to the apartment. And the whole way to the apartment, Jeff is just trying to prove that this is his lover, that they're in love. He shows them the Polaroids that they took. Like, no one would ever just let you take photos like this. Once they get back to Jeff's apartment and the police leave, Jeff injects more hydrochloric acid into this poor kid's skull, and this ends up killing the kid. And the next day, Jeff is like, I got 2 bodies in my apartment that I gotta get rid of. So he's like, I'm calling sick to work to take care of him. And he does his whole thing. Jeff lures 3 more men, and he does his things, and he gets pretty hefty with the calling into work to dismember the bodies. So then he gets fired from his chocolate job factory, and getting fired made him super upset. So then he's like, I'm ready for my next victim. And on July 22nd, 1991, Jeff sees these 3 men just hanging out, and so he goes up to them. He's like, hey, I got $100 for you guys to come to my apartment and take some photos. And only one of the 3 men agreed, and this man was 32 years old, and so they're walking up to Jeff's apartment, and the man remembers it just smelling horrible. I don't know how these other victims didn't notice that and be like, yo, dude, why does it stink so bad in here? Because they hung out. Like, Jeff says that they hung out for like hours before he would drug them and do anything to them. So I just don't understand. So they get into Jeff's apartment, and this victim notices that there's a bunch of hydrochloric acid on the floor, and he asks Jeff, like, dude, why do you have so much of this? Jeff's like, I clean bricks. I clean bricks with hydrochloric acid. Okay, Jeff is a really, Jeff comes up with some interesting things. So then they walk back to Jeff's bedroom, and this victim sees this giant 57-gallon drum just sitting in the corner, and he knew that this awful smell, that's where it was coming from, because it was just so bad, and it was coming from like that corner of the room. So then Jeff walks up to the victim, he like lays his hand on his chest, and then he takes out a knife, and he's like, I'm gonna eat your heart out. And the victim just begins to panic, and he's like, what am I getting myself into? So the victim goes into full panic mode, and he's trying to like plan his escape. And he asked Jeff if he can use the bathroom, hoping that there would be like a window in there. Sadly, there wasn't a window. So he comes back out of the bathroom, and they go out in the living room, and they're just chatting. And Jeff tries to like handcuff the dude, and the dude's like, whoa, no, you're not gonna handcuff me. And Jeff's like, oh, I thought we could just have some fun. And the man then asks if he can use the bathroom again. He goes into the bathroom, and he like has this full panic attack, and he's just like sitting in there, and he's like trying to figure out what he's gonna do. And so he comes out of the bathroom, and he notices that Jeff isn't paying attention. So he just runs full force and just punches Jeff as hard as he can, and then bolts out the front door. So it's like 11:30 at night at this point, and the victim's like running, like trying to find a police officer and finding any sort of help. And he finds 2 cops, and he waves them down. He tells them what happened. He's like, see, like, I still have this handcuff attached to me. Like, can you help me get it off? And the police are just like not believing it. Like, this story just sounds insane. So police try to help him get this handcuff off, but they weren't like actual police handcuffs, so their keys weren't working. So they're like, look, we can take you back to his apartment and ask for the key and get them off that way. And the guy's like, all right, if I'm going with 2 cops, it'll be fine. So they go up to Jeff's apartment. They knock on the door. Jeff opens and invites them in. And he's like, yeah, I put the handcuffs on him. But doesn't give any reason as to why. And so Jeff then says, like, the key is in his bedroom dresser drawer. And so a cop and Jeff decide to walk back there with the victim. And they're walking back there. And Jeff is like trying to get in front of him, and the cop's like, dude, get the hell out of my way. Like, I'm going in first. Goes in first. The police officer looks down in the dresser drawer, and he sees all of the Polaroids of him dismembering bodies, like their broken bodies, the sexual positions, everything. So he grabs a couple Polaroids, and he goes back to show his partner, and then Jeff just begins fighting with them to resist arrest. And they get Jeff handcuffed and call for backup, and they do a more detailed search. They found 7 skulls. Some were painted, some were not. 2 human hearts, part of an arm muscle in the bottom shelf of the fridge. The freezer had an entire torso and a bag of organs and flesh stuck to the ice at the bottom. And they also found 2 entire skeletons, a pair of severed hands, 2 severed and preserved penises, a mummified scalp, and in the drum that they like saw in the corner were 3 torsos dissolving in acid, and a total of 74 Polaroid photos. July 23rd, 1991. They bring Jeff in for questioning because they got to figure out why did he do this, right? And so Jeff just admits to the 16 murders of young men in the state of Wisconsin, and he just tells them everything. And Jeff says when he got arrested was the first time that he ever realized he did something wrong. Like, he didn't think he did anything wrong at any point. And so January 30th, 1982, the trial begins for Jeff's case. And it didn't take long, and they charged him with 15 counts of first-degree murder. And within 2 weeks, they decided that Jeff would get life in prison plus 70 years, so there's no chance of him getting out. And Jeff spent his first year in prison in solitary confinement for his safety, because several people were like, I'm gonna kill this dude once he gets in here. A lot of people wanted him dead. And on November 28th, 1994, Jeff was found on the bathroom floor. He went cleaning with 2 other inmates, and one of the guards had stepped away, and one of the inmates just started pounding his face into the wall, and then took a 20-inch metal pole, because they were like in the workout area of the prison, and just started beating Jeff with it. Now, some say that the guard was in on this, some say that he wasn't, and he genuinely just stepped away for a second. And this inmate also killed another person that was in there for murdering someone. This guy was also serving life in prison, so he didn't really care that he was gonna kill them anyway. Jeff was rushed to the hospital, but within an hour of being at the hospital, he was pronounced dead. That's it for Jeff's story. There is so much information on this dude. I had no idea like half of this stuff. Like, I knew Jeffrey Dahmer was this predominant like serial killer. Some say that he was a cannibal, some say that he wasn't. Jeff, in interviews at some point, he does say that he thought about eating them, but he never like actually said that I found that he has eaten some of his victims. He did keep their body parts and like their flesh and stuff, but that was pretty much it. In 2000, his mother did pass away. His father retired, and he wrote a book about like raising Jeffrey and what Jeffrey's childhood was like. Like his dad just took the money and ran with this story. And then his brother David changed his last name, and he has no part in anything with the Dahmers. You can't Google him. Like, he's hard to find. Like, he doesn't want to be found, and I don't blame him. But yeah, that was the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. There's so much research, and I encourage you guys to look up everything. A lot of the documentaries, they do have some false information. I try to watch the ones where specifically Jeffrey talking, and the ones of like his father. Like, I kind of got snippets of his book and things like that is what I researched, because I wanted the full honest truth of this guy. I'm losing my voice because of this, because I've been filming for an hour and a half now just talking. So yeah, that's Jeffrey Dahmer. That is who Jeffrey Dahmer is. If you wanted to have a more in-depth story of him, this is it. If you guys have any requests for any stories, leave them down below. I want to know your guys' thoughts as well. Comment those down below. If you have any true crime fans, bring them on over. Do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.